Welcome everyone to our Inside SAP S4HANA Immersive, directly from our Immersive Experience Studio here in Walldorf. Today we have a very special topic that came out of the SAP S4HANA Cloud Release 2202 in the area of quality management. And I'm very happy that my colleague Gerhard Welker is with us today on stage to talk about the topic of FMEA. So the first question, Gerhard, is what is FMEA?
Thank you, Yannick, for having me here. Difficult word or difficult abbreviation, but I will explain it to you what it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. FMEA is a shortcut for failure mode and effects analysis. It's a method for detecting and preventing possible failures in products and procedures already in an early stage of the development, for example, in the design phase. So the purpose is to record failure modes and effects for a component on the system.
Okay.
During the FMEA, you describe and evaluate your product or process for potential failures or weak points in a structured way. Based on the results, you can implement changes on the design, reevaluate, and thus prevent failures and avoid failure costs in production or claims by customers. There are three major types of FMEA: the functional, design, and process FMEA. And important is the standards we are following are defined by according to the US Association of the Automotive Industry Action Group, shortly called AIAG, and the top association of the German automobile manufacturers, shortly called VDA.
I need to ask you a question on that one, Gerhard. It seems like, especially in the automotive industry, the standards are set by such a working group that you mentioned, the US one, or the VDA in Germany. And of course, those methodologies or standards get updated as the industry evolves. So the simple question is the product evolving as well and as fast as the industry needs it?
Mm-hmm. Very good question, Yannick. Yeah, for sure. But to explain this, I need to elaborate a little bit what is the difference and what we developed in the current release. First, let me explain what are the key characteristics of FMEA. First one is to mention here that it's a documented method for selecting a design with a high probability of successful operation and safety. The idea is to have high probability of operations and safety so that the product standards are fulfilled.
But Gerhard, how is the FMEA process working exactly?
Okay. Actually, it provides a resulting list of failure modes ranked according to the seriousness of the system impact and likelihood of the occurrence. A further purpose of FMEA is to evaluate the effect of proposed changes to the design and or operational procedures. For instance, if we replace one material by another, what would be the effect on the whole system, on the process, or on the product itself? And the further characteristic is the usage of action priority.
Action priority. This sounds like a key term in the entire FMEA process. Can you allude a little bit? What is the purpose of an action priority?
Yeah. Sure, Yannick. And as you mentioned, this is really the important change also in defining the standard. First, let me mention here that an important point to understand the action priority is that here we are prioritizing the risk is one of the most important steps in the FMEA procedure for defining corrective actions. This we have to keep in mind. So the prioritization of the risk. And the action priority is the part of the harmonization of the two FMEA procedures defined by the one side by the VDA organization and also from the AIAG organization. And the action priority replaces the former risk priority number, which is shortly called RPN. And we are following this change in the standard adoption with our new implementation. And the action priority, also in which it's important to understand here, with the action priority, the risks are determined by weighting the severity the highest, then the occurrence, and last the detection. And the result can directly be determined in the action priority table.
Gerhard, so now you've told us different things. First, that this FMEA process meets completely the industry standard with the first release in the cloud already. You've explained the concept. Now, of course, I'd like to see a demo. Can you show us that live in a system, please?
Sure, Yannick. Let me show a simple example in the SAP S/4HANA Cloud system, our newest release, the 2202 release. And a true incident inspired me for building up this simple example in the system. Let me tell you a short story from my past 30 years ago when I bought my first racing bike. I was really proud to have this bike, but after a few weeks, and to be honest, this bike was also outside my house, was in rain. The steering wheel of my bicycle locked abruptly, and when I went down a hill at high speed, you could imagine how dangerous this situation was for me. But you see, I'm sitting today here, and I survived.
Is the bike still there as well at your place?
Right, it's still
Good.
there. Meanwhile, my son is riding this bike.
Speaks for good quality at that time already. Okay, and what happened then?
But we changed the bearing. But let me explain here what happened. When assembling of the bicycle, the worker had forgotten to grease the bearing of the steering head. And due to moisture penetration, the bearing has rusted, and the ball of the bearing head jammed between the bearing cage and the bearing shell, causing the steering to lock abruptly.
Okay.
Anyway, let's take a look into the S/4HANA Cloud system, where I will show you the example. First, let me show you in the system. We have 3 apps for doing the FMEA procedures. You see, we have a new Fiori app, Manage FMEA, and the transactions FMEA Cockpit and FMEA Monitor. Both together, all the 3 apps in combination are covering the FMEA process. And here we see the Manage FMEA app, which allows you to add additional filters in the filter criteria. You can also add here additional columns if you're interested in additional information on an FMEA. And here, let me create or start this demo by creating a new FMEA. And the FMEA should improve the process of assembling the headset bearing of a bicycle. So I name this FMEA headset bearing assembly as a process FMEA. You see here you have 2 options, design and process FMEA. In this case, we want to improve the process. So it's a process FMEA. And now you see it represented on this nice graphical representation. Now we open this FMEA in the object page or in the detail page. You see here that we can, if we switch now into the edit mode, that we now are able to maintain the parameters. We can switch into full screen mode for the left side and also doing this for the right side. And now let me maintain some attributes here. We can define a start date, choosing here the 3rd of March or 30th of March. We can define here the confidentiality level. You see it's a process FMEA. And this is important here. We are choosing here the rating profile as action priority. This is what I explained before. Here we are choosing here the option for the calculation of the action priority as a procedure. Also, you can restrict the FMEA via the authorization group. And I'm maintaining here racing bike as a keyword for better search of this FMEA. Now I save this process FMEA. So now in the next step, I'm going from the planning and preparation phase to the analysis phase. This is the phase where we build up the structure of this FMEA procedure. So we are starting with the process FMEA, which we have yet created. But this process FMEA belongs to my racing bike, which I'm in my example. So we can see here, I can create also successor or link this process FMEA to existing successors. And although on the right side with these action buttons, you see that I can create here a predecessor or link my FMEA with existing predecessor nodes. But in this demo, I will create now a successor. And this successor represents my racing bike. So the racing bike is of series RP 2022. And here I choose the FMEA type design FMEA because this is a product. And the design FMEA is assigned, correlate directly to a product or material in the system, whereas the process FMEA is correlated or assigned to a combination of material and operation. So now I continue with the functions tab in this graphical representation. And in the next step, I will create for this process FMEA a function. And this function gets the name lubricate headset bearing. This is what is important to control, that this is well done. Now it's also shown here in this graphical representation. And I'll also add here a function for the design FMEA for my racing bike, the product itself. And on the product, after assembly, I need a check for free movement of the steering system. This function is also now shown in the representation. Now, in the next step, you see here I can connect the function of the higher level element, the racing bike, with the function of my process FMEA. Because both functions are depending, so the lubricate headset bearing is a prerequisite for having a free movement of the steering. We can also display here the legend to explain the FMEA nodes. You can zoom in, zoom out. You can also use here the nice search function to highlight a particular node in the graphical representation. And here you switch now also to the full screen mode. And on our function, lubricate headset bearing, I'm creating now the failure mode. The failure mode is insufficient lubrication. Put it in as a description. And after saving, it's now also shown on the graphical network. And I'm also creating now a failure mode for the second function on the design FMEA. Because here I want to check after the assembly whether the steering is sluggishing or not. And sluggishing should be avoided. And also the failure modes are depending, so I can connect and link them together, because if lubrication is insufficient, the steering system will sluggish after the assembly of the bike. So, and with this, I'm at the end of my demo. You see that everything what we created are now shown on the graphical representation. And Yannick, I hope this gives you at a glance a good understanding what FMEA in S/4HANA Cloud means and how nice this new Fiori app represents this process.
Indeed, Gerd, I was really nicely impressed by the intuitive UX and the ability to have the process flow, to go into edit and change, zoom in, zoom out. So great job, engineering team. Thanks for showing this new app, Manage FMEA. And I have to tell you something, Gerd. We just got a question actually from someone on our chat. It's about the scope, because we talked about new things in S/4HANA Cloud, but of course there are similar applications in on-premise / private cloud. So the question is, how is the FMEA scope in SAP S/4HANA Cloud compared to on-premise or private cloud?
Yeah, good question. Yannick, as you know, or as you mentioned, in on-premise deployment, the FMEA process is not new. It's well known, and I think defined from the associations in the 90s. But as you also mentioned with your first question, it's modernized in the last years, and we are following now this modernization. So with the Fiori app, which we are now launching first in S/4HANA Cloud, we are following this modernization, which means that we fulfill this new defined standard of FMEA. And for cloud customers, this is more important. It's the first time with the 22.2 release that we now offering FMEA in quality management as a new process. But it's also interesting for the on-premise customers that now we are following, as mentioned, this modernization of the standard. And with the next main on-premise shipment or release, also this new Fiori app will be available for on-premise customers, so that they can also calculate and this action priority. As you mentioned for your question, the action priority is replacing the former KPI.
Very cool. So if I recap, fully fledged application, entire scope. We completely meet the industry standard from this working group in the US and in Germany, and latest and greatest on the UI, which you've just shown us. So Gerhard, I think you nailed it down. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing more topics coming from your area, quality management, maybe warehouse management and others. Thanks for being with us. And thanks to you guys for following us. If you want to chime in, submit topics, just use inside SAP S4HANA at sap.com. You can provide feedback to this session we just run, to others, and submit additional project questions or product questions if you want to. With that, hope to see you soon. Enjoy the rest of the day and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.